I sent Trustee Doss a text.
He's here now.
Sure. Oh, there he is. Oh, perfect. Wonderful. Okay, looks like we have everyone in place. Just double checking. We have the city manager and we have Chief Geisberger. Welcome to everyone and thank you for joining us. I'll go ahead and get started now with my notes. Well, thank you everyone for coming out today. It looks like we have 52 attendees already, and I know that yesterday we had a report of at least 75 signing up, so I expect we'll have a few more people trickling in. Thank you to everyone for coming out. My name is Nick Pilch, and I'm the mayor of Albany. The murder of George Floyd and the death of countless other Black people in the hands of police has catapulted the issue of systemic racism to the forefront. I'm committed to keeping the conversation on racism moving forward and to answering questions about policies and procedure in our own city, including the question, what is it that we might have to change? Black Lives Matter. This issue has energized people everywhere, including in our own small city. In my time in office, no issue has brought forth so many comments, and I think also attendance today speaks to that as well. This is why I thought it was so important that we start the conversation and have this town hall. We want today to be mostly a listening event, to hear from you, because after all, the outcry was so vast, so great. But I know you have questions too. We will get to these. And in fact, we've tried to answer many questions already. The city's website has a statement by myself and the Chief of Police, Chief Geisberger. Additionally, police policies have been and will continue to be available on our website under the department's police. I thank Chief Geisberger for his statement, for posting the policies, and I also thank him for just recently putting together a detailed frequently asked questions document that was released just this past Friday. It can be found on our website also by navigating to Departments Police. Right on the page there, you'll see another statement and a link to the frequently asked questions. The combination of these resources should answer many of your questions. You may have questions that are not answered by these documents, or you may need clarification. We intend to answer these questions as well and give you clarifications, but it may not be today. We want this forum to be mostly listening. We'll be taking note of questions that come up and make sure we get them answered. Today, we hear statements from the Vice Mayor, the City Manager, and the Chief. After that, I've asked 3 Black members of our community to speak. I'll introduce them in a moment. Then we'll open it up for comments to people who have joined the meeting. Finally, we'll have some brief concluding remarks. Thank you so much to all the staff who had a hand in putting this together so quickly, and thank you for the Vice Mayor as well for helping me put this together. And speaking of which, Vice Mayor, would you now like to say a few words, Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank all of you for joining with us together for this town hall, which gives us an opportunity to listen to one another, not only with our ears, but especially with our hearts. I'm looking forward to continuing this important work that we are doing today in partnership with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. And now I'd like to ask the City Manager and the Chief to put in a few words. Who would like to go first?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll jump in here. We find ourselves in a place and time where it's our responsibility to listen, learn, and act upon the demands of our communities in seeking justice for all members of our nation. While Albany prides itself on always seeking inclusivity and equity, these are not principles we can ever take lightly or assume we have already achieved. Each and every day, we are confronted with a call to action to conduct ourselves in a way that respects all members of our community. As City Manager, my responsibility includes ensuring the accountability and professionalism of our entire city staff, including our police department, We carry incredibly high standards as your city leaders, and we should always be held accountable to stringent standards by our community. I thank our City Council for their ongoing leadership through such incredibly challenging times, and I very much look forward to seeking solutions for an even better Albany together.
Thank you, City Manager. Chief Geisberger, would you like to say a few words?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership in hosting today's town hall. I appreciate you allowing us to be a part of it. I also want to thank the community members who over the past several days have reached out to learn more about their police department and how we operate and learn about our policies and procedures. As the mayor mentioned, we put together a pretty extensive FAQ page on our website, and we'll continue to update that as we move forward. I also want to recognize the senseless murder of George Floyd at the hands of law enforcement, and reassure our community that that is nothing that officers are trained to do. Mr. Floyd should not have lost his life during that encounter. I think as you learn more about our police department, you'll see we have current policies, procedures, training, supervision, and a culture that would not allow something like that to happen. And I want to assure the public that we will remain focused on community policing, and we're here to listen and learn how we can better serve the community. Thank you. Please stay healthy and safe.
Thank you very much, Chief. Now I'd like to introduce our featured speakers. The first speaker will be Board of Education Trustee Brian Doss. Brian, thank you for joining, and would you like to say some words now? You're still on, there you go.
Well,
thank you.
Appreciate everybody taking the time to be here. I wanted to make sure that I stay on point. So I want to make sure that there's three kind of points that I want to touch on. First, I wanted to just read over a statement that I put out with myself and Superintendent Dr. Frank Wells, because I know that there might be some community members joining us today that didn't get a chance to read over that letter. So I want to read that letter. Following that, I wanted to share my own personal experiences being here in Albany. And then I just wanted to end with a couple of factoids that I think would be beneficial. So I'll start with the reading of that statement. Our current climate, we discussed and shared our painful experiences and many challenges as African-American men, and felt compelled to write this joint statement regarding our current climate. There have been many protests throughout our country and locally here in the Bay Area. These protests are a result of the violations against humanity. We all watched how a white police officer literally murdered an African-American man, George Floyd. The tragic events that led to the recent loss of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, as well as the treatment of Chris Cooper, have put a spotlight on the treatment of African Americans in our society. These events, unlike most, were filmed. However, these incidents occur all the time. Historically, African Americans have been an oppressed group without justice and never afforded such luxuries as privilege or entitlement. Every day, Black people experience racism and hate that come in multiple forms, all of which are learned behaviors and originate at home, ranging from having low expectations of Black people to being treated by others as if this group is insignificant, and yet African Americans are expected to demonstrate great restraint against such disdain. When it comes to education, we can proudly say that when provided an opportunity, our African American students demonstrate excellence. Let us not forget Black people created math, sciences, and the university, where students and future scholars once came from all over the world to learn and study. This rich history has not been part of our curriculum as a prominent, significant contribution to the world. Imagine what this kind of omission does to a child, a student, and an adult. This is not only challenging and frustrating, but many of us find it simply tiring. Fannie Lou Hamer, a prominent American figure, said it best: "I am sick and tired of being sick and tired." In other words, we can no longer sustain our restraint. We must do something to contribute to change, not for us, but for our kids' sake. The children are dependent on us. Um, and then we also listed some action items that people can take on, reaching out to your Black colleagues and community members, being willing to have conversations like the ones we're having today, um, and also recognizing that many people are struggling mentally and emotionally because of the recent events, and making sure that they have the resources that they need. And we're dependent on you to do better, leaving no room for racism. Our generation must not be left with the final words, "I can't breathe." And that was from myself and Dr. Wells. We put out that statement. And so I thought it was important to read that just for, um, in case there were people who hadn't got a chance to take a look at that statement. And so I was thinking about this event today, and I was thinking about how can I make this time valuable. And I thought that one way that I can make this time valuable was talking about my own personal experience here in Albany. I graduated from Albany High School in 2001, and then came back as an adult uh, and have been here for a few years now, currently serving on the board. Um, during my time here in Albany, I've been pulled over by the police numerous times. I've had the police call on me on more than one occasion. Uh, and I've been asked more than once, including when I was actually running for office, if I even lived in Albany, and having to constantly prove where I live. And I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but that's a frustrating thing, to be paying all this money to live in Albany and still have to prove that you live here. If I had another option, I would live somewhere less expensive, to be honest with you. But having to prove that is frustrating. There was an incident that happened when I was living in the UC Village before I moved, and there was a little boy that was lost. He couldn't have been more than maybe 8 or 9 years old, and he was scared. He was terrified, and he was crying. And I wanted to try and help him because he looked scared. So I went over to him and I said, "Hey, young man, what's wrong?" And he said, "I'm lost. I don't know where my family is. I don't know where my dad is. I don't know where my mom is." And I said, "Okay, well, we're gonna help you. We're gonna figure this out." And so I pulled out my phone and I called the UC police to let them know that there was a young man that was lost that couldn't find his family. And about 3 or 4 people that lived in the village came over. And the first thing they asked was, "Sir, do you live here? What are you doing here?" And that was the first thing. The first thing that they thought to ask was, "What am I doing here?" And then after about 5 minutes of explaining to them that I lived in the UC Village and actually getting to the root of the problem, which was that this young man was lost and couldn't find his family, then we actually were able to get to that problem. So I know a lot of times we hear that, well, Albany is inclusive and things like that don't happen here, but things like that don't happen in Albany to people that don't look like me. It feels as if it's inclusive and everybody is in a good space for people that don't look like me. For people that look like me, racism does not skip cities. It doesn't go, well, oh, Albany, they're good there. Let me just skip on over to El Cerrito or Richmond. It stops right here as well. And it's something that we deal with every day. From something as simple as going to buy a pizza. I went to go buy a round table pizza and they messed up on the order. And so I said, "Well, this is not correct. I'd like my money back so that I can go buy a pizza from somewhere else." And before I even finished explaining to them why I needed a refund, 3 Albany police officers showed up to escort me away from the round table. that is a frustrating experience because me and my wife were just going and trying to get a pizza. The Ahmaud Arbery situation really hit home for me because I was also jogging from the El Cerrito BART station after a long day and was trying to get some additional exercise. And I guess I ran past this woman too fast. And so what she decided to do was call the police on me, and they stopped me in the middle of my run and asked me questions for about 30, 45 minutes. And so then when I got home, my wife was, well, where you been? You've been going for, and so then I had to tell her like, oh, well, I got stopped by the police. And then of course she was like mad that I took a long time to get home. But then after sharing the story, it's like, now I can't even have the normal husband you took too long to get home so your wife can be mad at you, because the conversation shifts to, wow, I didn't know that it was a life and death situation to go from the BART station to your home. And so those are just some of the experiences that I've had here in Albany. And so I thought that it would be good to be a little more interactive. So I'm wondering if you guys will participate with me here. If everybody could raise their hand, and I know that we can't see everybody that's participating in the meeting today, but I'm just gonna trust that everybody is raising their hand. So if everybody could just raise their hand and keep it raised, and I'm gonna ask some questions. And there won't be a quiz at the end. I just want to raise your hand and keep your hand raised. If you have been pulled over by the police less than 5 times, put your hand down. If you have been pulled over by the police less than 10 times, put your hand down. If you have been pulled over by the police less than 20 times, put your hand down. If you have been pulled over by the police less than 30 times, put your hand down. I could keep doing this at least 20 more times. And
Brian, that's a powerful point you're making. I want to make sure we have room for all the speakers to speak. So I love all your stories, including the one you told at the Board of Education meeting about your wife being hysterical because she couldn't reach you when you were out because your cell phone had died. But I do need to give time to the other speakers as well. So thank you.
Yep.
Do you have a few more concluding words, or?
I just have one thing I wanted to conclude with that I think will is a good point. I just wanted to conclude with it really fast, and I'll allow Zoom. The Zoom that we're using right now has 14 C-level executives. It has 1 Black C-level executive, and their title is Chief Diversity Officer. Airbnb has 17 senior leaders. They have 1 Black senior leader. Their title, Global Diversity and Belonging. Charter Communications has 22 senior leaders, 1 Black senior leader. You guessed it, Chief Diversity Officer. Bank of America has 16 C-level executives, 1 Black C-level executive, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. If we're gonna make real change, we have to have people in the rooms of Black people in those rooms making those decisions. And they have to be in leadership roles, and there has to be leadership roles that are outside of just diversity and inclusion, because we provide and bring a lot more to the table. And I will end with that.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. I'm sorry if it seems like I'm cutting you off. I just want to make sure we have time for all the other speakers. And really, we should have even more hours, days to hear all the stories. And as I'll mention coming up, the conversation will definitely continue. So thank you very much, Trustee. And Trustee Dawson, I would like to ask Superintendent Frank Wells, Dr. Wells, who has graciously also agreed to participate today to say a few words. Superintendent?
Great. Mayor, if you could be so kind, I want to kind of honor and respect the time. What do we have, about 3 minutes, 4 minutes? I don't want to go over. It would determine what story to tell or not tell.
Probably no more than 5.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I was born and raised here in the Bay Area, from a place you may have heard of called San Francisco. And San Francisco is a wonderful city and a place to live, and didn't realize how fortunate I was in terms of growing up, in terms of its rich diversity, people from every walk of life. But what a lot of folks don't realize that San Francisco has a few barrios, one of which where I grew up, in Bayview, Hunters Point, 71 Middle Point Road, the heart of Hunters Point. And I remember it being in 2nd grade and attending my neighborhood school where we would walk to school. And then it was an all African-American community. And in 2nd grade, they had something called desegregation, busing. And then next thing you know, on a short notice, we were bused from our neighborhood, poor African-American neighborhood, to a more ritzy part of town over in the Juniper Serra area. And I remember being on this big yellow bus and arriving to this more preferred area of town, being greeted by a bunch of adults, white adults who were from the neighborhood, and some of which were teachers at that time, letting us know we were not wanted in the neighborhood. And so fast forward, you can imagine I was a kid who was not very thrilled about school. I didn't like it with a passion. And it wasn't until I became a young teenager where I had this amazing teacher by the name of Mrs. Lee, who shared a couple of things with me and then told me that she knew my biggest secret. The 2 things she shared with me was accusatory. She accused me, 1, of being smart, and 2, of being brilliant. And then she whispered in my ear and said, "I know your biggest secret." And I looked back at her and she said, "I know you can't read." And she told me it was okay if I stay after school with her every day. She promised she'd teach me how to read. And it was then where I learned how to read, learned the phonemic awareness, began to read level books. And after I learned how to read from this great teacher, that's when I became a student. And then fast forward, in high school, excelled, applied to a number of universities, and was accepted in UC Berkeley. So education became, I think, some people call it the great equalizer, but it became a way to make progress in America when you're given the opportunities to have an equitable-like education, meaning that this teacher, Miss Lee, and I call her Santa Cruz-like because she has the white lady with the sandy brown hair, who was very wealthy, but this was her mission and calling. But she saw a kid who needed more time with her in order to be successful. She didn't give me everything that everybody else gave me. She gave me what I needed. And what did that do? Fast forward, Frank Wells get married, have 3 kids. First kid go off to college, graduate from UC Santa Barbara. Second kid, a son, went off to UC Santa Cruz, study molecular biology, graduated recently. And the final kid, studying business, San Francisco State, graduated last month. So here you have a cycle of poverty broken when we provided the opportunity through an equity lens, giving kids what they need, not everybody the same thing, but making sure they have what they need is really, really important. And one of the things we talk about, bringing an equity lens to our teaching and the way we do business here in Albany and around the Bay Area, that's critically important. And so when I went off to college and I decided not to go, I went to the military. But after getting out of the military, when I was figuring out what I wanted to do in life, I decided I wanted to be like Mrs. Lee because I wanted to make a difference in kids' life the way she made a difference in my life. And so I became a teacher, started off teaching kindergarten. And if you know anything about kindergarten, it's like the NFL, not for long. And so after my year in kindergarten, I was teaching upper grades. The next thing you know, I find myself in high school, coaching high school and those kinds of things. So I've been elementary school principal, middle school, high school principal, been in the field for just over 30 years. So I understand the dynamics and the racism and injustice and the equity that we need to have in our schools. And it starts in our home and carried through our schools so that we can not just talk about race and injustice, but position ourselves to do something about it. Here in Albany, after having an opportunity to talk to Trustee Doss, and really opening up and Black men talking to Black men the way we can't talk to anyone else because we have a shared history. One that is full of pain because of the gross injustices that occur to us just because of the color of our skin. The other is how do we deal with these injustices and how do we prepare our kids for it? And speaking of our kids, my son, when he was in high school, and during that wonderful time when high schoolers apply to colleges, many of them waiting for the letters, and my son applied to every UC school that he was interested here in California. And so does his friends. And if you ever been over my house and my son's friends, it looked like the United Nations. His friends are from every walk of life. But this was in a safe place where they were having a friendly conversation with my son. And when my son was sharing his letters where he got accepted, his friends asked him, how did he get accepted? Because some of them didn't get accepted to some of the top universities. And he asked, what do you mean? He said, well, what were your SAT score? He told him. Well, how did you do in your AP courses and score? He told him. And then they said, oh, we didn't know. And he asked, how would you know if I didn't tell you so? And so hence come a lesson about expectation and how other people look at you and view you just because of the color of your skin. And these are your friends. So welcome to the real world. If your friends think this about you, imagine folks who don't know. And so you always have to be twice as prepared in order to be considered. Frank Walls is the superintendent of Albany. I was told a few months ago that I'm the first African-American superintendent in the city of Albany. And as I look at the kind of experience one had to go through to get here, you just couldn't be good or good enough. You had to be at least twice as good to be even considered. And so these are the things that we have to grapple with and prepare ourselves. And is it fair? No, but it's our reality. And so one, we can spend time talking about it. And two, the next step is to do something about it so that we can be an inclusive city, an inclusive town that can be a model for the country. I see Albany with that kind of potential. And I felt that when I attended the march 2 Thursdays ago, when people from all walks of life in Albany came out to march for justice. We had people ranging from ages infancy to old folks with cane, to every nationality, every color. That gave us a glimpse of hope. So Albany has great potential. The issue becomes whether or not Albany is going to realize its potential, and that's going to be up to us and the youth.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Appreciate your words. In particular, I enjoyed hearing your story about what the recruiter said to you when you got the job in Albany. I'll leave that for another time, but it's obvious that allowing only 5 minutes for the speakers is not adequate. So I'm already thinking about how we might bring you back for another time, maybe a more informal discussion, maybe some sort of, if we can get together in person again. I would love to have you both back for a longer conversation. So thank you. And I'd like to introduce our last featured speaker, who is Mr. Sean Charles, the president of the Albany Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Charles, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. You guys hear me?
Okay. Yes, thanks.
Perfect.
Please go ahead and thank you for being.
Thank you. I want to thank the City of Albany for organizing today's call, and especially recognize our mayor, Nick Pilch, and our vice mayor, Peggy McQuaid. The conversation is a great building block into eradicating racism, starting with an engaged community working to understand racism's roots, and hopefully find resolve person by person, community by community, city by city. As a society, is we failed our own standards of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness when we limit those liberties to one overwhelming segment of the population. As with any corrective action, it takes an understanding and recognition of our faults into organizing purpose, commitment, and execution. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and the countless other African Americans who have lost their lives or livelihoods to the police or the judicial system. It's important to remember those names, as this momentum should not be forgotten or stopped. It's important that we also highlight their lives so they can't be lost through the continuous ever-changing news cycles. Some of the injustices that we currently face stem as an inaction of our society. Although protesting is the ultimate form of expression protected by our First Amendment, the real work starts at home. As an African American male, I can go back generations to the countless stories and struggles of what my family went through with racism, inequality, civil rights, interaction with police, etc. Stories between African American families are often shared as not only a sense of pride in history, but also serve as a life lesson to keep our family safe. My son is 13, and imagine having a conversation about police brutality starting at 6 years old with the shooting of Tamir Rice and every year ever since. With that being said, it's important that all families have that conversation. It doesn't matter if you're Black, white, Muslim, Christian, Democrat, or Republican. It's important that we understand each other so we understand where we're all coming from. We have to be able to listen to each other with compassion and tolerance. For Black people, it's also important that we're also mindful of the experiences that people may have had with us or who grew up in a household where African Americans or any community of color was disparaged. We have to be open to change and to break down these barriers that inhibit each other's greatness. When we ask you to listen to us, it's just as important that we listen to you. We don't want to pass to get away with anything more than what we earn. We just wanted to be treated as equals and given the same opportunities. If you're a great person, be great to us. Please understand that most Black people and Black communities are playing from behind. Imagine the incredible road it takes for a person of color to escape poverty, crime, drugs, or war to raise a family in Albany. We aren't afforded the same opportunities as many others, starting with our access to education and economic wealth, and the economic wealth that stems from it. Safety for African Americans goes well beyond the headlines of police brutality and really into our educational and judicial system where systemic racism is deeply rooted. With that understanding of oppression comes a lot of anger. We are an expressive community and express those feelings of oppression in different ways. Before you judge us, seek to understand us. And I just kind of want to highlight just a couple things about racism. As we talked about, and I appreciate the other speakers for giving their forms, they're giving their experience of racism. And, I've gone through a lot of them as well, too. But I just wanted to kind of talk about some of just that everyday racism that sometimes is the most hurtful. And especially, is when you hear that you don't act Black, or being told that, you're well-spoken or articulate, comparing your skin tone or hair texture to inanimate objects and so on. Being the only person asked, for our identification, not given the same privileges or sometimes worse, extra privileges, at an establishment. Driving a nice car and being asked if you're a drug dealer or an athlete. If these issues aren't being addressed or being discussed and addressed starting at home, we will continue to get these reactive explosions of police brutality, civil unrest, and injustice. I hope this conversation is the start of many more, especially to the continuing generations of police officers who will have all the public interests at heart. In closing, don't let social media drive the narrative on Black social issues. When Black families are disappearing from communities, let's continue to engage and ask why from our cities. I encourage you all to talk with your community leaders, including your city council, business leaders, and police departments to ask what they are doing about inclusion, diversity, and education. Support your community and neighbors that are actively engaging in agendas that support African American and minority programs of prosperity and enrichment. Support the educational systems that fund different programs for minorities, and especially that include African American cultural studies. When you don't see African American Black-owned businesses, Don't be afraid to ask why not. When you see Black-owned businesses, please support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Really appreciate your participation and the participation of all three panelists. Thank you so much. Now I'm very happy to hear from the rest of you. That's what we're here for. And I see that there's already 103 attendees showing up. So yes, already some people have started raising their hands. Please go ahead and raise your hand if you intend to speak or if you'd like to speak today. As you raise your hands, I'll say a few more other words of housekeeping, and then I'm going to go back and count the hands and see, make sure we have enough time for everyone to speak. So go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to or intend to speak today. In the meantime, the city website has information about how to join this meeting and how to raise your hand. Even if you're joined by just phone, I believe it's *9 to raise your hand. And that's a signal for us that you'd like to speak. As you raise your hand, you'll be put in a queue, and the city clerk and Sue will be working on that part of this next part of the town hall today, and be calling people one by one to speak. And let's see. After everyone who wants to speak gets a chance to speak, we will have a few brief concluding remarks. I do suggest that you look at if you're able to look at the frequently answered questions on our website. That might answer a lot of your questions that you might have right now. We will have Q&A, we will have more interactive sessions. The conversation will go on. I'll explain more about that after everyone is here. So let me do a little bit of math in my head. I see we've got 15 hands up so far. So let's more hands are going up now. Let's do 2 minutes for each person, and try to be mindful of the time. If you're in order to make sure we get everyone to speak, if you agree with the previous speaker, you can simply say that I agree with the previous speaker if you desire, or I don't. If you have your own words, please feel free. But we'll try to limit it to about 2 minutes per speaker. And now I'll turn it over to the city clerk and Sue to call people one by one.
First up will be Glenn Brown.
Hi there. This will be brief, but I wanted to kind of relay the experience of a coworker of mine African-American guy who frequented the Ivy Room when it was predominantly catering to an African-American audience. They played a lot of soul and R&B music in the previous ownership. His experience and the experience of the patrons was one largely of being, frankly, targeted by the Albany police. That he cannot remember a Friday, and he was there basically every Friday for about 2 years. He cannot remember a Friday in which there was not a police car with its flashers on in the driveway to the parking lot. He cannot remember a time in which the police officers weren't telling people smoking in front of the bar to move on, despite the fact that that's one of the areas that's cleared in our public smoking ordinance. He has a friend who's a bouncer who frankly experienced violence by a uniform Albany police officer who had basically as a revenge tactic because he'd previously thrown him out of the bar when he was off duty. And this was all brought up to me, frankly, at our holiday party before all of this happened, and I remembered it and had a meeting with him. But so this did not emerge out of the context of this current discussion. This was something he brought up to me as his experience of being in Albany, and I'm running out of time, so I'll just leave it at that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, if you'd like to say a couple more words, I'm redoing the math in my head. I think we can give each speaker 3 minutes. Sorry, City Clerk, but let's go ahead and change it to 3 minutes each. But do try to keep your comments as concise as possible in order to let as many people speak as possible. But let's go ahead and change it to 3 minutes. Mr. Brown, did you have anything more to say, or?
Nothing more to say specifically about that because I tried to compress as much of it as I can. I wanted to thank everybody who has shared and will share their experience, particularly Brian Doss, who kind of was a rude awakening for me about living in Albany while Black. And I want to thank you for being courageous and sharing that experience. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your comments and thoughts. Go ahead and call the next folks, please, with 3 minutes each. Thank you, City Clerk.
Randall Ma, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. So yesterday, I reached out to the mayor and council members about what proactive steps Albany is taking to address racism. And I received a response about our desire to change the zoning laws to make it possible to build more affordable housing. I think in isolation, I appreciate that sentiment very much. I would like to point out from publicly available information on albanyca.org that the Albany police budget has steadily increased over the years. It has grown, outpacing inflation, and remains the highest expenditure portion of the Albany city budget at 30%. So in light of this, I would like to voice my support for diverting police resources and defunding the police to support the very proactive measures the city council is looking to enact. I think when we talk about things about like putting more money in affordable housing and that sort of thing, that we have a chance to enact real change through policy now. And I would love to see the city that I grew up in put our money where our mouth is. I have a totally unrelated comment about the Albany Unified School District itself. My parents moved here in 1993. I went to K-12 education here. I went to UC Berkeley. In 13 years of schooling at Albany, I never once learned about redlining or segregation within the East Bay or Albany specifically. These are all things that I've had to go ahead and learn myself now. There's an article on the SF Chronicle chronicling like segregation within the Cordonices village, within the UC village that no longer exists anymore. Segregation in the East Bay and Albany, like schooling, I feel has always been framed from the perspective of the Jim Crow South, effectively very removed geographically from where we are. And I feel that we've been whitewashing our own history as Albany citizens. I think it's clear that is a part of our history, and we owe responsibility to the kids growing up in our K-12 system today for them to learn this now. So that's all I really have. I want to thank the mayor and the council members and everyone who has spoken previously for sharing their thoughts as well. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you very much. And I'll just say that if it was me that answered with the wrong subject to your email, I apologize. We've been receiving quite a bit of correspondence and up to 10 emails an hour, 100 or more emails a day. So apologies if I got things mixed up. Go ahead, City Clerk.
Jasmine Hamilton, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. I have a different experience. I grew up here in Albany, left for college, came back, decided to move back here to raise my family because I had a wonderful experience as a Black woman growing up in this town. When I moved back, I moved back to what seems like a very, very different Albany. And it could have just been ignorance growing up and not really knowing what racism looked like, or it wasn't out there for me, or maybe it looked different because I was a little less intimidating because I was a young Black female and not male. I'm not sure what that was, but in coming back, I've had some really different and alarming experiences. One, I have always supported the law enforcement of Albany. I have commended them on having a reputation of being stern and assertive and being seen. I really believe in law and order. I'm married to a police officer, and I believe that that there has to be structure in an environment. However, recently, I have noticed some extremely alarming behavior from not every officer, but one particular officer has been extremely, he's made me uncomfortable. I won't go into it because this isn't the time. But what I would like to say is, being here, being in this community, there are some wonderful, wonderful community members. But I think the question comes down to, do the white people in Albany really want this change they're talking about? Is this more of a, oh, we have to do this for appearance. We have to do this because it looks good. We have to do this or else we're going to appear racist. Or do you really want change? And that's going to be something that the white community members and the white leaders of this community are going to have to discuss amongst themselves and dig deep in their souls to see what kind of change that they want. Because maybe the truth is that this is all just for show. Because for the things to be going on in this city, for the Black members of this community to still be this uncomfortable in 2020, is showing that maybe the higher ups are fine with the way that things are. And when these hiccups come and we are forced to have these uncomfortable conversations, then okay, well, let's do it to save face. But if the city of Albany really wanted change, would it really take this long to start making those changes? I think it's up to the white people to look to themselves to see what kind of change they really want. I hope that things change. I have Black children. Again, I love this. I love the community as a whole. And I appreciate how most of the community members are embracing the Black community. But when it comes to the higher ups, the police department, the school district, that's its own disaster within itself. When is there going to be change? When are we going to hire teachers that reflect more of the community? When are we going to have more Black officers or more Latino officers, more Indian officers? When are we going to put our money where our mouth is? Or are we going to just continue to talk about this every time there's an uncomfortable situation in our country? Do we really want change, or is this a waste of our time?
Jasmine, your time is up and past. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pam Toulouse.
Hi, sorry. You have to turn it.
I think you'll have to turn off one of your devices.
I know, just turn yours off. Leave the meeting. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. You can hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
I've been in Albany for 23 years now, and I was actually reluctant to move here because, to me, Albany always had a reputation as being racist, as being the place that people of color got stopped. And I wasn't really that concerned for myself because I don't appear to be of color, but I didn't really want to live in a community like that. And I have to admit that I feel bad that I didn't take more action about it all those years when I would see the police stopping one person of color after another on Marin. I did write to the chief of police maybe 6 or 7 years ago and got a little bit waffly answer about it. But it does look to me like there's been some reduction in that, maybe in fear out of concern of having to keep statistics. I don't want to talk about the whole defunding the police using those words, but I would like to talk about shifting some of the things that the police do to avoid some of the interactions. Would it be possible for all fix-it tickets to be done like red light cameras are done, where instead of stopping people because there's a taillight out, there's a picture of the license plate taken and the person gets a fix-it letter in the mail. There are all kinds of ways that we could envision not using law enforcement that has the power of force to do so many of the things that police do. I'm sure a lot of police officers would be glad to be rid of some of those things, but I think it's something that we should be thinking about as a community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ife
I'm
Chuku,
done.
sorry if I'm butchering the name.
It looks like an Mr. or Mrs. Mr. or Ms. Okiki.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Ifechuku speaking here. I am a UC Village resident. I also have my brother who goes to Albany High School. I am Nigerian, I'm Black, and I'm responsible for my brother, I'm his guardian. So we are the only ones in this country who are, here with one another, and I'm taking care of him. And to be honest with you, he started at Albany High School, and it was terror. It was terror for him. It has been terror for him. Lots of trauma inflicted on him. If there are any parents, white parents of kids on this call, I would like to say that, raising anti-racist children is so important, because the people that he interacts with at school constantly, like Superintendent Wells said, those kinds of sentiments he has received, those kinds of sentiments of, oh, I didn't know you're so smart. His teachers having lesser expectations for him. One of the meetings I had with the teacher in math, she said to me, oh, for somebody of his background, he's doing amazing. And my brother had a C at the time. This was freshman year. I've had to advocate for him to be allowed to stay or go into AP classes because he's the Black boy. I had to ask the teacher, how many students in your class are Black? And I know that there are kids in his class who were doing worse than he was. On the other hand, being a resident in the city of Albany, we don't even go along to Solano. We don't go out there. We don't feel like that's somewhere that we can inhabit. I want you to just think of the magnitude of that in terms of having residents or having people who live in Albany. I went to, I think it was like a city meeting held around trying to figure out where there's a dog park. I'm trying to figure out like who gets to use the dog park and which one is the dog park. And people were advocating for there to be a dog park in Albany Bulb. I don't run to Albany Bulb anymore because I have a terrible experience with dogs. That's not accounted for in terms of the general population of people who live in Albany. Black people historically have had dogs unleashed on us by the police. I would also like my time to be extended because I believe the last person who spoke didn't use all of their time. And I believe that time should be yielded to the next person, but it seems like the timer starts at 3 minutes and I think they had 47, like a minute and 13 seconds left. Anyway, dogs unleashed on Black people, and the general consensus seems to be that people just believe that everybody loves dogs. And I remember speaking up and I remember people looking at me like I was an alien. I didn't even feel like I was a part of the community. And now I can't even go to Albany Bulb because people constantly have their dogs there, constantly just use that place as a dog park. And people's dogs more than once have come up to me barking. And so there's so many other instances that I could go on mentioning, but the general idea and the general feeling, even on the Albany High School website, lists University Village as where most of the diversity in Albany High School comes from. And it sort of feels like those of us who reside here aren't really a part of the city itself, which to me is very unfortunate, and which to me speaks volumes to the fact that Albany is such a racist city. It's sort of like ingrained in terms of the people who live here and sort of the expectations that they have for those of us who are not white or who might not be of high income status. And I would also like to support Randall Ma, who spoke earlier about creating more, defunding the police and creating more affordable housing in Albany, because as we know, most of the people who are in Albany or who come to Albany High School because of the reputation of the high school, they're so few in number and far between that the community itself and the students who are there feel so isolated in terms of seeing other people who look like them. And so I would really like for there to be more proactive policies that make it so that more people are able to come to the high school, regardless of whether or not they live in Albany, and not have to wait on the wait list because they live in lower income areas while low income housing is being built in Albany.
Ms. Okeke, your time is up. Thank you. Next up is Yvonne Lin.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I would like to share a personal experience, which is, so I think it's important to say that I'm Asian American female, quite young, and people generally think I'm harmless, which means that they think that they can be patronizing or kind to me until I say something they don't like. One day I was walking home from the bus stop and I saw a Albany police officer harassing an unhoused person who was unwell and lying in the middle of the Albany Greenway. I asked him if there was anything wrong, and he said that in a really derogatory tone that he just needed to like take care of this problem essentially. Then I tried to turn to this person and ask them if they needed help. And this officer immediately got not violent, but very aggressive in his tone in a way that made it clear that there would be a problem if I continued to press. I do not think police officers should ever treat anyone the way that they spoke to the person who was clearly harmless, who could not do anything. Their orientation should not be towards harassing or abusing people, but trying to help them. And this is clear that it's not happening in Albany. To that end, I do think that it is necessary to defund the police. I am tired of hearing people say that they want to listen every single time somebody's death makes it to the headlines in this country. And I'm tired of events where well-intentioned white people gather anyone who's kind enough to share the most painful experiences of their lives in an effort to persuade you to see them as human. I think that it's absolutely necessary to take money away from the police and to put it into structures like education and social work, crisis intervention. The list is endless. You've probably already seen it, or else nothing will ever change. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to note that we did not figure in the ability to yield time to someone else, but I don't want to unnecessarily cut off people either. Let's make sure we have give everyone a chance to speak at 3 minutes. And then if there is time at the end, we can, and people have brief comments, we can allow that. Thank you very much. Go ahead, City Clerk.
Monique Hossein, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Monique Hossein. I'm also a student living in University Village. I'm a multiracial Black woman. And I first want to say that we should be making sure that when we talk about racism, it is not about the personally mediated form of racism. Those are important. They're damaging to health, but it's more than our trauma stories of microaggressions. It is about systems, it's about policies, practices, and norms. And if we want to do something about it, that means looking at hiring practices, how voting is done, what are the structures in place that provide economic opportunities, not setting up Black communities as an ATM. How is policing done in terms of funding? Is it revenue generation, or is it public safety? And if it's public safety, I want to stand with what an earlier caller, Randall Ma, said about diverting those funds to things that actually increase safety for communities. So this is not about bad apples or what a wonderful person the police chief is. I have heard that, by the way. Good guy was the word. But that is not the point. My concerns, as they have always been from the beginning, is why in a town of 20,000 people do we have a SWAT, or people don't like to call it anymore, response team, whatever the word is, but it's a paramilitary unit that I've seen about. I have seen military style rifles, even at the Albany Bulb. That's disturbing, and I can't imagine what the need is for it. And it should be concerning that the reputation of police practice in Albany, that I've heard from a professor, from a doctoral student, both Black men who've been stopped here. Oh yeah, they're racist, just like that. So I think that should be something of concern that should be addressed, and it should be addressed with a historical context. And I think that's, I think those are my main points, and those are the things I would like to see addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl Sudeth.
actually said it.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you for putting on this forum, but I really want to be clear in the reason why this is being done. Is this being done so that the city of Albany can check off a box for itself and feel good? Or is this being done to hold space for those of us in Albany who need to be able to speak to what's happening to those of us in the community who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color? So I did not hear the agenda for this program. I did not hear that in here. As someone who is married to an Albany grad who went through this in the 80s, as someone who has 3 children who are Albany grads, who each experience their own, not just microaggressions, but macro aggressions against them for being Latino and Black students at Albany. And still, my daughter has never received an apology from Albany High, and none of her friends received any type of apology from the city of Albany or from Albany Unified School District for having to go through the pain that they were caused from that Instagram incident. Yet Albany, the city of Albany, and Albany Unified walks through the streets of Albany talking about Black Lives Matter. There is something to be said about capitalizing on Black pain. There's something to be said about using a hashtag with empty words. If you're going to talk it, you must walk it. Those of you on this call who know me, including Vice Mayor Peggy, hello, including Mayor Pilch, hello, Nick, and including Dr. Wales, hello. You know that I've been involved in Albany for 20+ years. I'm an elected official myself. I'm on the ACLU board that covers Albany, Berkeley, and Northeast Bay. I'm also on the Contra Costa Racial Justice Oversight Board. I do a lot in our community in Contra Costa and in Alameda County. I do not say these words emptily. You cannot use Black pain for gain unless you are going to put the work in, unless you're going to support the Black community, unless you're going to support these students with some real curricula that teaches them the things that some of these people are talking about. Unless your public safety is going to make sure that people are not getting stopped haphazardly. I understand this clock is going to ring, but I ask for your indulgence for just one moment. I have been stopped. I have been stopped because I drive an expensive car. And there is nothing more humiliating to be stopped and then to be let go after someone holds you up just to say, I apologize, sorry about that. Because you've done nothing wrong. I have done everything to try to teach my children to be good so-called citizens and to be good people. And now I feel sometimes like I'm being a fraud because you can still do right and still have your chest, your heart in your throat when those lights flash behind you and you don't know if you're going to make it home. Those of you who are back, hold on just a moment. I understand, Mayor. But like I said, if you're not holding this space, for those of us who are Black and Indigenous people of color, I'm not sure why you're having this forum. But let me say this and I will finish. Those of you who have the privilege of lying your head down at night and sleeping peacefully when your children are not home, that is a privilege. Those of us who have Black children, especially sons, or who are married to a Black man, we don't have that privilege. I hold my breath every night when my sons are not here. When my 2 sons are away at Atlanta and Morehouse, I cannot sleep unless I get the text to know they are in their dorm. I cannot sleep until my husband walks in the door at night. I cannot sleep until I know my daughter is in her dorm at St. Mary's College. That is a terror we live with every day. And so I need you sometimes to hear the words that some of us are feeling and some of us know in and out every day. If that is the reason for this forum, if that is the reason, sometimes you don't just listen, you hear. And that's,
Yes.
I thank you for having the forum, and I want you to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's very difficult in a forum where we have to have time limits. Thank you for understanding that. I just want to say really quickly and clearly that if this is all just talk, then I will have failed. So that's not the intention here. The intention is that this first event is a listening event, and the discussion will continue. Thank you. Go ahead, City Clerk.
Adrian Cabanatuan. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing the last name. Go ahead.
Nope, that was perfect, actually. Thank you very much. I am a resident of Albany, have been for going on 18 years now. I have a son who's gone through the Albany Unified School District and I've been very active in the school system. What I wanted to ask you today has been sort of alluded to by a number of other speakers, and that is, what are your intentions? I think it's great to have listening events, and I think it's great to hear what's going on, but it does take action. And what I've seen from being involved in this community is that it's on these teeny tiny levels that we have to get involved, but I've seen a lot of defensiveness when people try to make change. I've seen a lot of people in elected official positions respond out of defensiveness when we try to make some changes or ask for things to be different. This year at the high school and this pandemic was quite an experience for my high school student son. I can only imagine what this experience has been like for other people. But what I noticed was a lack of attention from the school district to the students themselves and response to the parents of the students. We had teachers who were absent. We had teachers who were not responding to students. We had a teacher, frankly, for our son who just completely left the building, did not act, did not do anything, did not assign anything, did not check in, and there was no communication. What's been troubling to me, and this is regarding the school system, is that the ethnic studies program that was come up with by Ms. Lausem of the district, which was a tremendous program that she worked very hard to get in. She's an amazing teacher. Midstream, she was moved to become the principal. Great opportunity for her. But a white man was put in her place to teach ethnic studies, and that was an utter failure. An utter failure. Okay? The Spanish language program that's there, from the middle school to the high school, it's just not teaching the students to be aware of their community. It's teaching from a book. So I ask you, both in the school district sense of things, and I realize that these are two separate entities, but in the school district side of things, I want to see action. On the city council, I want to see action, not just discussion. You have a responsibility to not just continue to hold these meetings where you are listening. You meet every other week. The Social Economic Justice Committee canceled their recent meeting. There's a need for action, and there's a need to do something. And I really demand that our elected officials and the people that we're counting on do something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Preston Jordan, go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much. I guess I'll start with a story of white privilege by contrast. A few years ago, I let the tags on my car expire for various reasons. I don't drive very much each year. And I knew that I could do that because if I got pulled over, I didn't expect to get pulled over, one. And if I got pulled over, it would be an amicable exchange. And I was pulled over on 80 down in San Jose at one point and got my ticket. It was an amicable exchange and I went on my way. So just to, dramatically different life experience. I don't suffer from attacks on my psyche, on my energy, that so many others have described in this call. Monique Hussein brought up voting. A group of us have fought for 12 years to bring a fair election method to Albany. And we've been fighting a majority of the city council over those 12 years. We finally went to an initiative. The school board voted a number of times to ask the council to put ranked choice voting on the ballot. Unfortunately, we got shut down on our initiative because of the pandemic in collecting signatures. Fortunately, and I commend Vice Mayor McQuaid because she was one of the 3 council members who had been opposing this. In fairness, she recognized we would have gotten it on the ballot, and she has supported putting it on the ballot. And with that, the other 2 council members who had been opposing essentially flipped their stance and joined the majority to vote unanimously to put it on the ballot by intent. Tomorrow night, they will actually take that action, I hope, I believe. This will bring demonstrable change to Albany. This method was used in over 24 cities prior to 1950. And in many of those cities, first Black people were elected to the council. The white majority reacted relatively volcanically to that in every city and managed to get it repealed everywhere but Cambridge, Massachusetts, which has been using it since then. As soon as Cambridge got to 10% Black population share, it had a Black council member. And when it got to about 15%, it started having 2 Black council members as a 9-member council. So we're trying to make change come. I hope this will pass on the ballot. I trust that the city council will put it on the ballot. And I just want to ask the police chief, so the budget's gone from 25% of the APD portion of Albany's budget has gone from 25% in 2014 to 30% now. Violent crime has gone down, property crime has gone down. So why is crime going down but the budget going up? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Neil, go ahead.
Did I unmute? Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I have been an Albany resident for 17 years, and my son and I have volunteered at APOL events on numerous occasions over the last 10 years. I have personally never been stopped by the Albany police and questioned about what I was doing and where I was going. I was on a Zoom call discussing George Floyd's death with a friend to a biracial child, and he had his friends over. And I was commenting on how lucky we were to live somewhere where we didn't have to feel for the safety of our children. The boys laughed at me, and then they proceeded to tell me stories, way too many stories of how they had been stopped by Albany police again and again and again. And these were all minor children, Black and brown children. They had been stopped while biking to school by the police, questioned, what are you doing? Where are you going? Walking home from friends' houses, walking to friends' houses, walking home from the bank after making deposits for their parents, jaywalking across the street in the pouring rain without jackets, walking to El Cerrito Plaza. All these boys had been stopped in between 2 and 4 times, and they weren't even 18 years old. I can't express enough how disappointing that was. Like they should not, so now none of them would come forward. None of them would speak at today's meeting because they were all scared in fear of retaliation. And now, instead of the police in Albany making them feel safe like they're supposed to, they're actually fearful because they've been stopped and been treated as they were a threat within their own communities. So I have a few questions. Have Albany officers completed anti-bias training? If so, how often? How often is it revisited? And has it conducted with multiple providers to accommodate different learning styles? 2, can signs also be posted at the Albany police station and in patrol cars where officers need to be reminded and not to see people just for the color of their skin, but would I be doing this behavior before they even approach anyone if the person were white? And 3, I saw that demographic data was going to be recorded beginning 2022. How do we get that happening sooner? What message are these harassing behaviors sending to the people experiencing them about how they're being seen by the police? What message are we sending as a community if we do nothing and allow these behaviors to continue? Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine James, go ahead.
Hello, hi, I've been an Albany resident for 22 years and 2 of my children went through Albany schools. I think Randall Ma was a classmate of my daughter's, and to his point about how are we educating our students and the redlining that's happened in Albany, and also how will we use that 2016 racist Instagram account where Asian and white boys terrorized Black and brown girls in the school. The district settled with those families for $500,000. And how are we holding our community and our students and our parents accountable? We've failed those students, and we're failing our Black and brown students every day when we don't address that going forward. And I'd also like to, for our new superintendent, reference the ProPublica's miseducation statistics about Black students in Albany being 6.6 times more likely to be suspended than white students in our community. And I think one of the other speakers asked the question that I also ask is, what is the concrete plan to hire Black and brown educators? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I didn't hear my name, but I see that a sign came up saying to unmute myself. So I'm assuming I am the person who's supposed to speak, Lisa Rose. Somebody should nod their head.
You are on.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah. All right. So I'm a relatively new resident of Albany. I'm a property owner. I actually grew up in Los Angeles in the middle of a very working class mixed community. So this has been a very different experience for me living in Albany, but I want to share what an experience I had with the school district here. I am a public school teacher. I have a master's degree. I've got a 4.1 GPA, and I've been a teacher for a while. I had the experience of going for a teaching job here. I did not get that job. And it was shortly after there was some sort of incident, which now I'm hearing more about. The teacher that judged me and made a decision or gave counsel to the school district on that had the kids, I guess, had encountered a bunch of graffiti around the school, Albany High School, some of it very racist, anti-Semitic. And the solution that the teacher used was to paint over this stuff and make art out of it. What I want you to know is I took a very different approach in my teaching demo. I had those kids actually illustrate stories of their own experience as people of color and collaborate with each other. And the point of this is that what I was aware of was how the current way of handling, it seemed to me, racism, anti-Semitism, whatever it was to cover it up, as somebody else has said, paint over it, make something pretty out of it. And I want you to know that one of the most powerful stories that I've ever read came out of that little 20-minute session that I had with the kids. And I just want to say, as a teacher, as a trained teacher, I really beg of you, Albany School District, please you need to look straight ahead at the problem and not cover it up. And I really encourage you to use the arts to do so, and to look at your hiring methods. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Susan Moffett, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to echo the many people who have talked about the need for structural change and also to get beyond kind of feel-good measures, talking about diversity and inclusion, getting to justice and getting to changes in how we spend money. I think it's going to be really important for citizens to be given an opportunity to really understand what we spend on what, and we may want to deploy our resources very differently than we do. Just concretely, I'm also disappointed that we're not going to have reporting on the ethnicity of police stops for several more years. I think that if we can move that up, that would be great. And also, I think it would be helpful to analyze what the citizen calls the makeup of that. That is, if we citizens are continuing to disproportionately call the police whenever we see a person jogging while Black or doing whatever else the rest of us can enjoy in peace, we need to know that too. And I think that we need to learn Albany's racist history, just like we need to learn the history of the United States. And I feel like my children were also not properly educated, just as I was not educated in the reality of American history. And now we can't pretend not to know that this is not just the past, but it's the present. And I also just want to call for action. I'm disappointed that on tomorrow's City Council agenda, the only item relating to what we're talking about today is discussion of a mural. And I think that we need to be talking about resources and budget and policies. And speaking as a mixed race Asian and white person, we need to address anti-Blackness in the Asian community as well as in the white community. And I think it's time, and I think you're hearing from Asians and white people that we expect change. And we don't want to just keep talking anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me just break in for quickly that there is another item on the agenda about authorizing the Social and Economic Justice Committee to study this issue further. And I'll be talking about that more at the end. Thank you. Go ahead, City Clerk.
Sarah Lefkowitz, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I am a Jewish woman. I grew up in a neighborhood in the Bronx that was challenging. I lived in Oakland for a bunch of years and moved here for the public schools, and have been happy here, raised my two children. And I appreciate really everything everybody has said. And so I want to talk a little bit about the community. And as a white person, I think a lot about what's the community that we all want to live in. And so too often I see we in the community call the police to solve problems. And the whole point of conflict resolution, of how we talk to our neighbors, and this is why I appreciate this, even though it's listening, becomes more difficult. So I know in Oakland, and especially in the high schools, that they have a lot of restorative justice programs, and that this has been a really important way that conflicts between students have been worked out. And I know that there's been budget cuts. And so my comment is that this has been very important for the students in Oakland, and they're trying to move the police out of Oakland schools. And I'd like to see restorative justice programs in our schools in Albany as a way that people can start to learn alternative ways to work out conflicts that are not law and order methods, because I think that's part of the problem. So many of these things need to be worked out between people. And so when we talk about shifting funding of the police, I'd really like to see it shifted into those programs. So maybe I can work out my problem with my neighbor, and that person can also work with me. And so, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Gregory Downs. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Greg Downs. I'm the chair of the Social and Economic Justice Commission. I'm here primarily to listen. And I agree with the point that's been repeatedly stated here about the need to translate these experiences and ideas and proposals into policy and to ongoing oversight. And I know that some changes have happened and some more are planned. So I want to just very briefly ask a question. Chief Geisberger, I very much appreciate your statement, your FAQs. I distribute them to people who've asked me questions, like the council. I've received many, many inquiries about this, and they have appreciated them. I have also asked staff to invite you and/or department members to our meetings, including our upcoming July meeting, to continue to engage with residents' questions and to continue to talk about the efforts that Albany Police is making. And I would just like to ask either for you to come or to designate someone who can come and speak about the department on your behalf. So I hope that you will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Lindsay Melnick. Go ahead.
Hey, so I grew up in Albany. I recently returned as an adult. So I'm very used to how Albany really likes to embrace this image of being multicultural and diverse, but not necessarily putting any substance behind it. So I would really like to see the police department defunded, see those funds diverted to other departments, education, mental health services, social work. Yeah, going through the Albany school system, as another person said before, yeah, the multicultural education.
Sorry, I think we're losing you.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, hearing that there is even a cultural, ethnic studies course at Albany High now. We didn't even have that when I was there. So I guess sounds like maybe it's getting a little better, but I think it could do a lot better. So yeah, I would like to see there being other options other than the police for people to call that are not a person with a gun showing up. Thanks. I yield my time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Aaron Peterman. Go ahead.
Hi there. I've been a resident of Albany my whole life, and I think it's sort of, as many people have mentioned, it's impossible to escape what Albany is and what people experience here. From the fact that friends of mine in high school, when I went there just a couple of years ago, said, I'm the only person of color in some of these AP classes and some of these advanced courses, to the fact that the only time I've been pulled over by a cop in Albany, I was let go even though I was speeding, because they assumed I was a respectable white kid who got off. So I think we really need to recognize that and do something about it. And I want to thank everyone who shared their experience, and all of the speakers. Two things have stuck with me that Brian Doss and Dr. Wells said. I mean, first, that racism doesn't skip towns. I think living in a place like the Bay Area, we often get caught up in thinking that we're this bastion of progressiveness and that everything we do is fine and we don't have to deal with some of these problems. And I think that's a real danger, because we do have to recognize and deal with these issues, and we need to take concrete action. And that's why I think it's so true what Dr. Wells said, that Albany has great potential and we need to realize it and step up to that, because we have this potential to do something. We're a small town where we don't have that much crime. We don't need the police force to be taking up so much of the city's budget. We can redirect those resources to do other things, and we have the political will. We have people who want to do better from every background, and we just need to do that. We need to direct those resources to other places instead of just having a hammer and so everything looks like nails. So thank you.
Thank you. And it appears that that is the last attendee who had his or her hand up. Is there anyone who did not get a chance to speak? If so, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Oh, there's a couple more hands raised, so we do have some time. Go ahead, City Clerk, and call those hands. I see there's at least one person, though, that is had previously spoken. And that would be Ms. Neal. If you could allow the others who have not spoken yet to go first, I would appreciate that. So go ahead, City Clerk.
Angela Mahone, go ahead.
Hi, it's McMahon. Thank you so much. And I just want to, thank you for having this meeting today and, hearing the leaders from the community speak. But my question is just kind of specifically, what's going to be the follow-up from this meeting? Because I know that there's talk about other meetings happening and more discussions, but, and I want to believe that everybody's listening today, especially, the experiences that have come from the leaders in the community. But even before the open floor kind of started, Mayor Milch, you had kind of directed us to the frequently asked questions page. And just kind of two things with that. One, the questions that we're asking aren't on that page. And then secondly, when are these going to stop being frequently asked questions, and when will we get definite answers about what we want to know? And then another comment, just as far as just affordable housing that's coming up, again, I guess that's, a solution to some of the things that's happening. But if the treatment of the people who live in this community hasn't changed, what is changing the demographics of the city going to do except for just bringing more people and having them exposed to the issues that we're already having? When are the root cause of these issues going to be addressed? That's all. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Let me just jump in real quick on that. Yeah, apologies. I think it's my fault for not making it clear that one of the reasons that we wanted to have this be a listening event was to determine what the next steps are. Clearly, we have to answer questions. Clearly, we have to continue the discussion. There is an item on the agenda for the City Council meeting tomorrow night to direct the Social and Economic Justice Commission. But I'm very open to what we need to do next. So if it's more town halls, directing the Social and Economic Justice Commission, et cetera, the City Council will be talking about all that and talking about the next steps. And again, I certainly don't want this to be the only forum. I'll leave it at that for now, and go ahead, City Clerk.
Janelle Gary, go ahead.
Good afternoon. This is Janelle Gary. I apologize for my tardiness. I was supposed to be a part of this town hall meeting. I appreciate everyone that I was able to hear the comments and the concerns. I am the vice chair on the Social Economic Justice Commission, and I'm ready to get to work. I no longer want to talk about this because I've been immersed in this my entire adult life and childhood growing up in Texas. So I know what it feels like. I know what my brothers and sisters, Black and brown brothers and sisters, are talking about when they have a hard time sleeping at night. driving to work, I'm afraid that a policeman's going to stop me. Who can I call in case something goes bad? That's an issue and that's a problem. I have no more tolerance for just sitting around talking. Matter of fact, I'm putting together a Juneteenth celebration. We did one last year in Albany, the first one. I've asked that we bring that back so we can educate the people, so they can understand what a people, Black and brown, went through the history of this United States. Again, I won't go into much detail on the response that I received, but I'm a bit disappointed. Before I get off this line, I want to say one more thing. I'm not in agreement with putting a Black Lives Matters mural up when there's so many things that can be done with the funding that is used to put that up. We can use that for resources to help build our city, educate our city. The small business district is suffering right now. So I'm going to digress, and I'll speak more at the city council meeting, but I did want to come in and thank the mayor, vice mayor, and the chief police staff for having this forum. But it's time to get to work, and I'm ready to get to work. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Julia Dinglassen, go ahead.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
So I was a student at the Albany School District. I've been living here since I was 5. I went to Marin School, I went to Albany Middle School and Albany High School, and I just want to say that I'm a non-Black person of color, and it has been very apparent that from when I was like a little child in elementary school, that anti-Blackness is a big part of the Albany community. And like, it breaks my heart to say this, but the way in which the teachers in Albany treat the Black students is obviously different than the way that they treat the other students who are not Black. And obviously this is like a cultural thing that needs to change, that can happen through like various education initiatives. And for people, sorry, I'm like really nervous right now. So this is a cultural change, is something that will take a long time. However, I think that in order to protect the Black community that is already here, like, we need solutions now. And I think that a big part of the solutions can come from defunding the police, which currently hold 30% of the Albany city budget, and is the largest single recipient of Albany funding. And I just wanted to make it very clear that we should be defunding the police. I don't think I've heard that enough today. I mean, but I just want to make it clear that there are a lot of us out here that do believe this. And yeah, thank you.
Hi, sorry, my name is Sophie Dinglassen. I'm on the call with my sister. I was actually in the grade. I was in the grade when the racist Instagram account happened. The people who were targeted were women of color in my grade. And the thing is, I don't think that the perpetrators of the account, the people who were following the account, or the people who created the account were like appropriately accounted for the actions that they took. And the thing is, now a lot, what I've been seeing on social media is now people have been calling them out, and it's been gaining traction. And I think that is appropriate, and I think that is warranted. But the thing is, it's coming from activists on social media, and it has not come from the Albany Unified School District. Thank you.
Thank you both.
David Danby, go ahead.
Hi, it's actually, can you hear me? Yes? Yeah, it's actually Julie Winkelstein.
Yeah.
I'm on this computer. I want to thank the people who've made the comments, especially the beginning of this meeting. But I just had 2 comments. One is, I assume the chief will clear this up, but the statistics that are going to be gathered are not based on, they're based on perception of the police officer and not on who the person really is. So whether they perceive them to be a person of color, whether they perceive them to be LGBT, whether they perceive what their gender is perceived. And I just think that would be a really interesting conversation. I just wanted to, I know he will probably say more about that, but that's what he explained to me. And then I looked it up, and I think it's an interesting aspect of that. And then, but my main point that I wanted to make is this is an online meeting, and I'm wondering, what about the people who don't have access to a device, who don't have access to the internet, especially with the library closed? I'm wondering how the city got out information to people, whether you made it possible to view this in certain places, maybe set up a screen, maybe set up some way so that people who don't have access, who aren't hooked into your website, who didn't even know about this happening, which happens a lot with the city council events, that most of the time the city council puts out information about the events only online. And so a lot of people don't know anything about it. So if you really want to bring in all voices, you can't really come away from this meeting saying you heard from a lot of people, maybe you heard from some people in Albany, but you're missing a lot of voices. And I would like to see you to address the digital equity issues and also address your lack of whatever it is, what your need or want or desire to really reach out beyond the digital world or the e-world or whatever you want to call it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just throw in a comment that I do believe we've reached out by all electronic means. The number of attendees are dropping off little by little. I just wanted to quickly mention that we have an e-notification system which can be accessed right on the front page. It's up near the top of the page where you can get emails about things happening in the city. I encourage everyone to sign up for that. That's a great way to be notified. As far as I know, we did put this out through all electronic means possible. Due to shelter in place in the current COVID situation, it's difficult to do more at this point, but I will think about and encourage the staff to think about all ways we can make sure that this is noticed and advertised as well as possible. Okay, next speaker, please.
Tanisha Niels, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask a really, my main point, or one of my main points, it's less to do with police, but it was, do we have anything in the pipeline to enact a system like they did in Portland, where if you call the police on a Black or brown person just because for doing the most mundane things, that it'll be actionable, and the person calling will actually have to pay damages to the person that they're calling on? Do we have anything like that in the works? As I'd really like to see, I mean, you can't really change people's minds, but I think it will really help let people know that that is absolutely not tolerated in our community. And that is all.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think we will want to make sure we have time for concluding remarks, so we'll stop the attendee comment at this time. Thank you for that question. I think that will be an ongoing question to ask, part of our discussion going forward. Just briefly, I want to just touch on a few things that I heard during the remarks, but then I know that Trustee Doss wants to say a few words, and perhaps the city manager does too, and then I have some concluding remarks. So just quickly, I understand the skepticism. I understand that people are wondering if this is going to be just talk or action. Let me reiterate that I'm committed to this not being just talk. And one of the reasons, again, that we had this is to figure out the way forward. And we do have the Social and Economic Justice Commission who's ready, willing, and able to take this on as well. I do encourage people to go to the frequently answered questions to make sure that any questions that they have are not answered there, and then I'm committed to making sure we answer all those questions as best we can if they are not answered there and in the police policies. I have had a conversation with our chief, and we'll have further conversations with our chief. And I thought it was very interesting that the school districts came up a lot in these conversations. School district and the city are separate entities, but obviously the concerns of the citizens doesn't stop at one or the other. Our residents attend the schools. We have parents for the schools, we have school children in schools, and obviously everyone is a resident of Albany. So I would also like to make sure that we continue to work with the school district as much as possible going forward. I think that's all I have for now. So Trustee Doss, I know you wanted to make a a few concluding remarks, so I'll open it up to you at this moment.
Thank you. I just wanted to say a few things. I heard a lot of great ideas, and I had a few myself. I think that this is an opportunity for to put some action behind our words, and I want to make sure that we have some action moving forward. So this is my plea to put a few people on the spot. I'd like to put our current police chief on the spot a little bit, along with Dr. Wells. I'm hoping that we can schedule a meeting to sit down and talk about some ideas I have to keep our students safer as they travel to and from school and home. And so I'm hoping that we can schedule some time to meet, to talk about that. I have some ideas. With that, I also would like to to work with the city to make Juneteenth a holiday, maybe a paid holiday for staff, and to also work with the city and the businesses in the area so that they can celebrate and take part in this as well, and to make it as big of a deal as it actually is, and educate people that might not be aware of its significance. And a couple of other things here. A newsletter. I would like for this to be an ongoing conversation and to kind of address something that one of the community members said about people who might not have internet access. Maybe we could have a newsletter that we update on the action items that we're doing that goes out to everybody, and then have a way for them to maybe send in comments and questions that they might have, so that we can make sure we engage everybody. And then the last thing I want to end with is that I am personally going to make it my mission to increase the Black teachers that we have here in Albany. I want for students to see teachers that look like them when they go to school, and then be able to learn and engage with people that look like them. So I'm going to make that my personal mission. When they allow me to be able to go in person, I'm going to go in person and talk to people and tell them why they should come here and why we need them. In the meantime, if there's events and things that are happening online that I can jump into, try and talk to people and recruit, I'm going to make that my personal mission to work on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments and your participation again. I want to just note before I forget to say it that we had up to 110 attendees on this call today, so really thank everyone for coming out. And with regards to the Zoom meeting, participation by just phone is possible, and you're able to raise your hand using *9. So that should help with access to these sorts of events before we can all just get together in person again. So at this time, I wanted to see if the city manager wanted to make any concluding remarks or not.
Thank you, Mayor, and really a thank you and appreciation to everyone that took time out of their Sunday to participate in this first of many events on this subject, and how we work together collaboratively to find solutions. I heard over and over again that it's time for action, and I completely agree. We will move forward together, and we will find ways to ensure that everybody can participate, and I really look forward to the opportunity.
Thank you very much for that. I have some concluding remarks as well, but I want to make sure that you didn't forget any panelists. Did any other panelists have any quick concluding remarks?
Yes, my remark is just really poignant, and that is we welcome the challenge and opportunities. We also want to be careful that we don't point the finger and say, we want you to fix it, because we should fix it collectively together. So I want to keep that in mind, because we're in this together and we need to solve the issues together. And it's not a finger pointing, but it should be a teammanship moving forward. The city working with the school district and vice versa, because I think we are just that much better together than we are apart. And so I would encourage the city, as I extend a hand to the city and a partnership, so that we work together to tackle these real issues that need a tackling yesterday.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else on the panel? If not, I'll go ahead and make my concluding remarks. Okay. Well, thank you again all for your participation. As I stated before, the conversation will continue and we'll respond to your questions as soon as we can. Please do review the material on the website, particularly the FAQ, which we'll be keeping as a living document, updating as we go, and when we have more answers to post. Racism exists, unfortunately, and it's far from dead. We are a relatively quiet town, a town full of people who care. But as the Trump 2016 white power painted on the Albany Greenway, and the painting of a swastika on the residence of a Black family, and racist posts on social media attest, we are not immune to racism here. We must be careful not to fall into the trap that it could not happen here, but continue the conversation about whatever it is we need to do to fight racism and make change. Finally, on our agenda for City Council meeting tomorrow, as I alluded to previously, we have 2 items related to today's event. Approval for the Social and Economic Justice Commission, SEJC, to take up the study of this subject, and approval for the city to paint Black Lives Matter on the Albany Greenway. I thank you again for your participation here. We'll leave it here for today, but we will be in touch about how the conversation will move forward. Have a great rest of your day. Stay well, stay safe, protect yourselves and others by distancing and wearing a mask, wearing a face covering, please, whenever you leave your home. This is still the current order of county health officials. This concludes our town hall. Bye-bye now for now, and thank you again so much.